I'm Diane Petrella, and I'm Dean of the College of the Arts here at Kent State, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all to our campus and to Art Without Limits. Thank you for joining us today. I'm sure this is going to be a really exciting and inspirational day of presentations, exhibits, activities. All of these are designed to highlight the possibilities for artists who are entrepreneurs. This event has evolved from a small panel who spoke with about 40 Kent State students to today's event, which as you can see is quite comprehensive. We have over 300 high school students joining us today, all of whom are interested in the arts, along with several hundred community members, and then of course our students from the College of the Arts, around 2,500 of them, who will be attending activities throughout the day. This type of event takes a lot of time and effort to plan, so I do want to take a moment to just thank everyone who contributed to this year's Art Without Limits. First, our entrepreneur in residence and College of the Arts faculty member, Nick Petrella, whose vision has elevated this concept to what you see today. I also want to thank our faculty and our staff who served on the planning committee. Thank you all for your efforts if you're in here. I know that this was a lot of work. The College of the Arts staff has risen and accomplished a tremendous amount in this. They've pitched in to cover on every front in solving unexpected problems, and we are grateful for your efforts, and I thank you all for everything that you've done. I want to extend a special thank you to the Brinzo Center for Entrepreneurship and LaunchNet, who have been our partners in this event. And I do hope you all have just a great day here on our campus. Don't be afraid to ask a lot of questions in some of these sessions. Make sure that you go over to the DI Hub, which is not far from here, and see all of the exhibits. We have arts and arts-related organizations from Kent State students, from alums, from community members, local artists, all on display over at the DI Hub, which is also just a super cool place to visit. I want to thank you all for being here and invite you to join us at the end of the day in the lobby right outside of Cartwright Hall, where we will have some refreshments and an opportunity to network with all of our students and faculty and our guest speakers. So at this point, it's my pleasure to introduce Associate Professor of Art, Taryn McMahon, who will get us started by introducing our first speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Dean Petrella. Hi everyone, I'm Taryn McMahon and I teach in the Studio Art Division in the School of Art. Thanks so much for being here today and for attending Yusko's talk. I want to say quickly first that if you are a prospective student who's interested in studio art or any of our programs in the School of Art, including art history or art education, and you see me around today, feel free to introduce yourself and ask me a question if you have one. I'm thrilled today to introduce our first speaker, Stephen Yusko. Yusko earned his BFA in sculpture from the University of Akron, where he worked with Don Harvey, and his MFA in metalsmithing from Southern Illinois University, Carbondale. He has received many awards, exhibitions, and teaching invitations across the US and abroad, including in Wexford, Ireland, and Halifax, Nova Scotia. Yusko served as an intern, apprentice, and then artist in residence at the Metal Museum in Memphis. His work was included in the exhibition Forge, shown at the Ruthin Craft Centre in Wales and the Metal Museum in Memphis, which also held a solo exhibition of his work. He was a Wingate artist in residence at Purchase College in New York and was an artist in residence at the prestigious Rose Iron Works in Cleveland. In 2021, he was commissioned by the Cleveland Metro Parks to create a piece of public art for the Wendy's Way pedestrian bridge. He has served on the board of trustees for the Haystack School of Crafts, where he has frequently taught and exhibited. He lives and works in Cleveland. Welcome, Stephen, and thank you so much for sharing your vast expertise with us today.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Stephen Yusko. I create sculpture, furniture, vessels, and public art in my Cleveland, Ohio studio using mixed material combined with forged, machined, and fabricated steel. I want to thank Kent State for having me out this morning. Thank you, Taryn, for the introduction, and thank you all for attending this morning. I'm happy to be here as part of this Arts Without Limit event. So I'm not a big fan of inspirational memes filled with platitudes, but since I spend several hours a week riding my bicycle, this one resonates with me, as does this quote by former St. Louis Cardinals baseball manager Whitey Herzog. Here are his 4 rules. Be on time, bust your butt, play smart, and have some fun while you're at it, for God's sakes. Those are rules that I like to live by. So the two equilateral triangles pretty much help define how I live my life, how I approach my studio practice, and who I am as an object maker and artist. Everything we do is about balance. If one side of the triangle gets shortened, the other two sides have to increase in length in order for the triangle to remain intact and connected. This morning, I'd like to talk about a few artists who have chosen career paths that fit within the theme of artist-entrepreneur. I could spend a semester giving presentations about people I've met in the 30 years in the metalsmithing field and whose work interests and inspires me, but here's 4 that I'll talk about. So this is work by Warren Holtzman. He began his career in 1995 after graduating from Kutztown University in Pennsylvania. He spent 4 months working in a horrible job as a welding maintenance welder in a lead smelting plant. Can't imagine a worse job than that. And he got better in a job in a fab shop, and he quickly earned the trust of the owner and was given keys to the shop and free after-hours access. After 4 years, he basically worked 2 jobs, as some of us have done, working for your employment by day and your studio work at night. And this is a fence and a gate that he built in 1997. It's located in Chelsea, just in New York City. So after 4 years in Reading, Pennsylvania, is this too loud? It seems really loud, no? All right. He moved to Philadelphia to work with a freelance designer and an artist co-op called Artists at Work. In 2002, he rented a building in downtown Philly and opened his own studio. As he took on more complicated projects, he hired people and built his business. Fast forward to 2010, and Warren buys the building, and he has a team of several people working for Holtzman Iron Studio, both in the shop and in the office. This is Bryn Athyn Cathedral, which is located about 15 miles north of Philadelphia. Sorry, I forgot to start my timer, so give me an eyeball here. Anyway, this was built between 1913 and 1919 by John Pitcairn and his son Raymond, and they're the P's from PPG, Pittsburgh Plate Glass. And this is Glen Cairn. This was built between 1928 and 1939 and is located next to Bryn Athyn Cathedral, and is the former resident of Raymond Pitcairn and his family. So I've toured the cathedral and the museum, and they're both filled with amazing craftsmanship all throughout. And since 2009, Holtzman Iron Studio has been designing and building architectural work in the Gothic and Romanesque style, and in materials used throughout the cathedral. And they use Monel, which is a high nickel alloy, and stainless steel for the most part. And this is a handrail that Warren built in this company. It's patinaed stainless steel to look like patinaed copper. This is St. Joseph University in Philadelphia. Warren and his team collaborated with the architect firm called Moto Design Shop, and Warren Studio built this 40-foot tall cross. And this is a detail of the cross. It's hollow constructed out of weathering steel, and it's in the language of forged steel. They also did a lot of work on the interior of the chapel, and this is a shot of the inside. The pendant chandelier was based on a rose window, and Warren also built the pulpit and the candelabra. This is a detailed shot of the rose window chandelier in his studio. It's 12.5 feet in diameter. And then this is the candelabra, the pulpit, the tabernacle in the background, and the lectern. So with the gates of the Discovery Center in Philadelphia, this is another Moto Design Studio and Holtzman Iron Studio collaboration. The center is situated next to an abandoned reservoir and is home to the National Audubon Society and Outward Bound. So these are Warren's gates, partially open, completely open. And this detail shows the repetition of the forged elements that create the pattern. So early in his career, Warren took solace in something that his undergrad professor impressed upon him, that it was okay if making art is not your primary source of income. Sometimes you have to raise show dogs so you can keep your pet cats, he said. The following are a few examples of Warren's personal work. This is a 12-foot long whale made of patinaed steel and wood, and it was for the exhibition called Forging a Link at the Mercer Museum in Pennsylvania. Selected artists within a 100-mile radius of the museum responded to an object in the museum's collection, and Warren chose tools from the whaling industry. This is one of a series of 4 so far tables, forged steel and chased in repoussé steel sheet that Warren's made. He has a beautiful balance of elements from the projects he's done at Holtzman Iron Studio, combined with his personal aesthetic and his love for the hot working process. Next up are Scott Larson and Carl Zeek. These are founders and owners of Shred & Company, which is a Cleveland-based design build studio. Scott, who's on the left, was working in partnership with a building contractor for 11 years and brought his cousin Carl in to work with him. In 2015, they split off and formed their own partnership, Shred & Company, and for 2 years they worked out of Scott's garage and out of his house. He said there were drop cloths everywhere. Then in 2017, along with Scott's brother, photographer Peter Larson, they bought a studio building near downtown Cleveland. One of their first big commissions was for Steel Light Corporation, which is a flatware design company. The cushion of that budget for this project and subsequent projects for Steel Light allowed Shred & Company to grow as designers and makers. And Scott says that the projects like this shape you as a person and as an artist. This is another flatware display case for Steel Light. It certainly helps having a brother who's a commercial photographer. They take on a wide variety of work that challenges them and gives them an opportunity to showcase their mastery of design and materials. This is a build out of a 2018 Sprinter van. They also fabricated the lightweight roof rack for this. Interior shot of Scott showing how the bed folds down. This is their dining room table / ping pong table. They have such thoughtful design and such attention to detail and functionality. It's the perfect blending of wood and steel. And when not in use as a ping pong table, the components are all thoughtfully packed away and they can be hung on the wall. Next up is Erica Moody. Erica received her BA in Fine Art Photography with a cross-discipline focus from Hampshire College and Amherst, Mass. Post-graduating, she was more interested in the lifestyle of making than in academia and went to work for a metal fabricator in a co-op in Boston. She worked on high-end residential restoration and learned her craft while on the job. She loved the practicality of the lifestyle, and from 2001 and through 2016, she was in business on her own as Magma Metalworks, which she's since changed to just her name, Erica Moody Studios, as a freelance fabricator and designer. She took on really intense commercial projects and created custom architectural elements, hardware, and furniture. By 2016, burned out and wanting to recalibrate, Erica moved to Waldoboro in Midcoast, Maine. On the left is a postcard of one of her very recent shows, and on the right is her really beautiful way to advertise that she has gift cards available. Erica's work celebrates the handmade object, and with her photography background, she gracefully depicts the beauty of making handmade objects part of her clients' lives. She says that making a living doing this type of work is a lifestyle choice, and that's what she's really about, the lifestyle of her work. She's developed an efficient method of working so there's time to enjoy living in Maine. She strives to connect the resources and community and to have a low impact on the environment, and she donates 10% of all of her retail sales to a different cause each month. At a symposium held in May of this year at Touchstone Center for the Crafts, Erica talked about the importance of being in the moment. If you're looking over there, you may not be paying attention to what is here, she says. And I love the way her bold photography is used to draw the viewer's attention and to set a tone. She uses no white backdrops, and I think this is a really effective way to show the work. Simple, graceful, elegant, and functional. This is Erica Moody's work. And finally, this is Boris Bally. This is him in his studio, my studio, on Monday. He's sitting on top of the sheet plate roller that he gave me. I've known Boris for most of my career, and he's the most entrepreneurial and business-savvy metalsmith I know, and one of the most generous as well. He's always the first to send images for an exhibition that he's in. His work has been featured on more exhibition PR material than anybody I know. He's super high energy, and his approach to creativity is to just jump into it and get caught up in the moment of making. He's the son of an industrial designer father and a tapestry weaver mother, left brain, right brain. He's been around making his entire life. At just 15 years old, Boris participated in his first craft show selling aluminum skateboard decks, t-shirts, and stickers, and he was hooked. He graduated early from high school and went to Switzerland for a one-year intensive immersion to train with a goldsmith. He then went to Tyler School of Art for 2 years before transferring to and getting his BFA from Carnegie Mellon University. Often in his work, Boris raises awareness for social issues, such as with this handgun menorah, and the weapons are courtesy of Good for Guns Anti-Violence Coalition in the city of Pittsburgh. Some of the many decommissioned handguns that he had were sent to 100 makers in the US and around the world. We all made works from the entire guns or from parts of them. The exhibition traveled the US for years. It may still be traveling, I'm not sure. And there's a book featuring all the works as well. This was my contribution to the first Imagine Peace Now exhibition. In the early 90s, Boris went to a scrapyard to find inexpensive material to work with and found discarded recycled aluminum street signs and began experimenting with working with aluminum. Boris uses keychains as calling cards, saying, if you have a larger net to catch, you catch more people. He's also developed several different product lines using the aluminum signs, and here are some of the coasters that he makes. 24-inch diameter platters, and these beautiful transit chairs. Responding to a design challenge after being invited to participate in a chair exhibition, Boris made these transit chairs. Over the past 30 years, he's made 4 major design tweaks to these iconic chairs. I have one, and I can verify that they not only look fantastic, but they're super comfortable. And the champagne corks that he uses feet act as a mini shock absorber to prevent floors from getting scratched up. Okay, now on to my work. So since this is a gathering to talk about entrepreneurism, I can share this with you. My business plan has always gone something like this: make the best work I can and hope that someone likes it enough to buy it. This is not really a plan you can take to the bank, but so far it's worked out okay. So back to the beginning. I went to the University of Akron to get a degree in engineering, but after my second year, I realized that calculus and I were never going to be friends, and so I bailed on that. I knew, though, that I wanted to design and build things, so I moved into the art department and graduated in 1990 with a BFA in sculpture and metalsmithing. And it's weird looking back on this work from 30 years ago, especially when some of my classmates are here. I'm still interested in a lot of the same things in this work: pattern and texture, combining materials, and creating objects and paring them down to their essential elements. Not many people see this one. After graduating, I spent the better part of a year at Penland School of Crafts, located in the mountains of western North Carolina. And this is where I made my first forgings using cut nails as the starting point. Yeah, that's embarrassing. In the fall of '91, I went to work at the Metal Museum, which is located on a bluff on the Mississippi River in Memphis, Tennessee. And these are the gates that greet you when you enter the museum. And this is the person who greeted me, Jim Wallace, the former director and the museum's founder. I spent the first half of the '90s at the Metal Museum, and I can honestly say that during those years, there is nowhere else I would have rather worked. I learned some things by observing, but lots more by doing. There's an amazing we can accomplish anything attitude about the museum. It's infectious, and most people who've worked there have it. They have the stories and burn marks to prove it. I have mine, and I wouldn't trade them for anything. We made a suit of Etruscan armor. We restored the larger-than-life bronze statue of Elvis. I learned how to forge and build furniture. And I began making sculptures combined with forged elements and manipulated found objects, and drew inspiration from the simple physics property that for every action, there's an equal but opposite reaction. I made 12-foot-tall sculptures that were inspired by harvesting the fields in Arkansas across the river. And I started making boxes in '94, '95, and this is the first one of the first ones that I made. The sequence on the right shows the forging progression that will give the box on the left, and the lid is made out of wrought iron, which was scrounged out of the river in Memphis, the Mississippi River. So I made a lot of boxes that were inspired by agricultural and architectural buildings around the farm, and also shaker boxes. And then in 1996, after 5 years at the museum, I went to graduate school at Southern Illinois University at Carbondale. And I lived out in the woods, and I found some fencing material and made this box out of some found barbed wire fencing material. And I wanted this box to have neither a front or a back, or both. This was a box I made in '97 while teaching at Penland School of Crafts. This was for the big auction. In typical art student fashion, pulled an all-nighter to finish it. This is nail box. I figured since the MFA is your terminal degree in studio arts, I should earn it. So I started doing more complicated forging and forming. This is how the lid indexes onto the box. And while at Carbondale, I had 3 years to hone what my professor Don Harvey called the Yusko fit. I built oil cans that were sort of functional, 18-inch tall ones that were completely non-functional, watering cans that were very heavy. This is 3 feet across and weighs about 30 pounds. And the lid is probably one of the most complicated sheet forming projects I've ever done. But you're supposed to do that stuff in graduate school. So for my thesis exhibition, I made a series of sculptures designed to catch and contain ethereal and intangible elements like a thought or an idea. This piece, along with the next one, can be unclipped from the wall and taken out for a spin. This one was made, this was 1999, 2000 for this piece, and Y2K and zeros and ones weren't going to talk to each other, and the world was going to be left in darkness. And so I figured, well, at least we'll always have light. So this is a lantern, an oil lamp, so we can have light. As a way to get out of the blacksmithing studio, I studied black and white photography at Carbondale, but that was kind of a mistake because I ended up in an even smaller, darker room. This was in film days. And I took sensitometry, which was the science of how black and white photography works, and I learned more about my sculpture through photography probably than I did in the blacksmith studio. So once I learned how to use the camera, I put it away and I picked up a toy Diana camera. It's a little plastic camera with this beautiful vignetting, and I documented the power plant at school, and that was part of my thesis show. So then after grad school, I moved to St. Louis, and I worked at the St. Louis Art Museum for 7 years. I did freelance work for the Pulitzer Foundation, building mounts as well, and this is one of the more challenging mount projects that I worked on. It's totem poles from the Asmat culture, which is around New Guinea. The shortest one of these is 15 feet, the tallest is 19, and they were recessed into the wall, so you can see that the wall's not completely finished patching around them yet. And while I was at the museum, I heard a lecture by Chuck Close, and he talked about problem solving and how problem solving was overrated, and that was really what was important, was problem creating, because you go to your own studio and you create your own problems and you solve your own problems, not everybody else's. And I know it kind of comes down to semantics, but I really like that approach. So I started making some sculptures that dealt with systems of things passing through. My studio was in an old condenser house, and so I built this piece called Condenser. And then I was really inspired by the Mars rovers, Spirit and Opportunity in 2004, and I made this sculpture and the next one. This piece is about 8 feet tall. It's called Traveler, and that fan blade spins around if you give it a whirl. So in 2006, I took a leave of absence from the St. Louis Art Museum, and I taught for 2 months at Penland School of Crafts. And when I came back, I knew I had to just go full-time into the studio. So I quit the museum, and I knew I was not going to make a living collecting my own sculptures. And so I started making some furniture and vessels that related to the furniture. So this was the first coffee table I built in 2006. And then one of the boxes or vessels that went along with it using the same material. This is about 11 inches tall or so. And then I made a pile of these yellow boxes out of the tubing that I found. And the shot below, you can see the threaded pipe, and it's cut open, and that's how these lids are formed. And this is also where I started using Morse code in the work. So those dots and dashes could be used to spell things, and I thought that was kind of cool. This is a glamour shot of Cleveland, shot by Dan Morgan. I moved to Cleveland in 2007 to work with Rose Ironworks. They had an artist in residence named Paul Fair. They brought him in 1929, and he worked through 1934. And then they brought me in 2007, and the Great Recession hit in 2008. So they don't have a really good track record of bringing in artists in residence during the boom times. But I was happy to be there, and I worked for them for 5 years full-time and half a year part-time. And then I just went solo into the studio. But this is probably the most famous Art Deco piece of metalwork in the United States, which is at the Cleveland Museum of Art. It's the Deco screen. And it's just called Muse with Violin, and it's just amazing. So one of the things I did there was to redesign some deco work, and this is a plant stand I developed along with Melvin Rose, which was the second generation Rose. They're under the third generation for the last 40 years with Bob Rose. So this is about 46 inches tall. steel and plated steel. But mainly why I went there was to do some of my own work for Rose Iron. So this is a console table that I designed and built for them. It's Corian and steel and stainless, and there's a detail shot of it. I also built some complementary side tables to go along with it. And then the big recession hit and we scaled down a little bit. And so one of the things Rose makes are these tongs, which I thought were really beautiful. And so I made these coat hangers to hang a jacket or whatever on, but they were extremely labor intensive and there was no way we were gonna sell these. So I came up with this design instead that I could produce rather than getting cast in stainless. And so these are the butterfly hangers. And they work really beautifully for hanging a coat or a scarf or a wet towel. Rose Iron has a 250-ton press, so I took advantage of that squishing power and started making some things. This is an oil lamp on the left and a candle holder on the right. And every once in a while, I'd get a misblow under that giant press, and the piece would be unusable for a candle holder, but it worked great as a little teapot. So I started making these blue boxes, or in this shape, kind of based on an old ice house that I saw up in New York. The layout lines on the front of this blue box are how I would start laying out the Morse code. And if I did cut the squares and rectangles out, this would say home on this box. And the other side would spell away. And again, you can see the forging progression on how to get to the roof material. I made these two boxes right after the 2016 presidential elections. Signal box. MT is on the left, it's the red one, and the blue one on the right spells resist in Morse code. And these two, along with some other pieces, went to the Ruthin Craft Centre in Wales and then traveled the country and closed at the Metal Museum. And I was really psyched because my pieces got on the cover of the catalog, so that was a nice honor. This is LG box. I often incorporate the client's initials in Morse code, and so that is L and G in Morse code along the box. This is the largest lidded vessel that I've made so far. It's called Citadel. It's 20 inches long and a foot tall. It's made out of 1/4-inch plate and weighs about 30 pounds. But I really enjoyed working on this scale. There's a detail of it. This box is called Reliquary, and I tried really hard for probably 2 decades to never make a piece called Reliquary, but this one just had to be called that, because this is what's inside. It's an old factory inside. And I love the way the glass distorts the images inside. So here's a couple more in that same series. This is Trinity box. It's about 1 foot across, 5 inches tall or so. And I'll show you the sequence of how this material is created. So I like making my own found material. So I find this rusty material, it's woven. And then the next image on the right, you can see that it's been sandblasted. And then I cut little rods to fill in the gaps and put it all on top of a piece of 1/8-inch steel sheet or plate. Clamp it all together and just lightly tack weld it with the TIG welder. And then on the image on the right, you can see the tack welded version of it. And then to the right of that, the forge welded version of what that forge is down to. So under heat and pressure, steel will stick to itself. And that's what's happening here. So then I've cut that apart. And made 2 of those exact panels and then created this box. And it lifts off at the white line there. I made some more of that material and made a little incense burner. It was really hard to photograph that to get the smoke coming out just right, so that was kind of fun. This is the Deer Isle Bridge up in Maine. It was built in 1938. It's 1,000 feet long, and I've had a nice relationship with Haystack School over the last 25 years or so, having taught there several times, and as Taryn said, I was on the board of directors there for 9 years. It was an amazing place to go and to be. In 1962, Edward Larrabee Barnes designed Haystack. The campus was built to float above the ground and have a very light footprint. Commenting on the Haystack campus, Fran Merritt, the school's first director, noted that the buildings are temporary, but the ideas are permanent. And the buildings have been there since 1962, so they're kind of permanent too. This is a typical building at Haystack using locally sourced material before it was cool. This is the Main Avenue Bridge over the Cuyahoga River in Cleveland. Part of my artist statement sometimes says that I'm intrigued by the structure of things and by the stories that the visual vocabulary of architectural elements and industrial processes tells. and I incorporate those elements into objects that I make. And this is my favorite bridge in Cleveland. So I've made a suite of tables based on these bridges. This was the first one from 2011, I think. The glass is called low iron glass, so it's got a nice bluish edge rather than that green edge that most glass has. It's really optically pure. There are a couple of detail shots of it, the organic legs, the top of the legs here, and then the levelers that are incorporated into the feet on the right side. This sculpture is called Transit. It references a surveying instrument and a means of passing through as well. So inspired by the framework and mechanisms that converge to make something happen, the things that make the thing, my work expands on these underlying components by exploring themes of balance, distance, and concepts of home. Long skinny tables led to even longer and skinnier sculptures. There's a detail. I made this during a Wingate residency at SUNY Purchase up in New York in 2014. I was there for a semester, and I was traveling between Ohio and New York a lot, and so this was kind of on my mind. This one is called The Way Things Go. It's 7 feet long, and it's based on a film that we saw in undergrad by Peter Fischley and David Weiss that was called The Way Things Go. It's a great film if you haven't seen it. It was also inspired by Hot Wheel cars. I like my work to be playful. This is a detail of that piece. As some of you makers know, making things look simple is really complicated. And this is the final piece in that series called The View From Here. The trestle legs were inspired by railroad trestles and also by sawhorses that pretty much every dad in the neighborhood dragged out on the weekends, threw a piece of plywood on top and started working. So that was cool because that's when work gets done. This is a detail of the houses. They're attached with rare earth magnets and indicator pins. I didn't want to see bolts and any screws holding those on. And the glass detail. So the glass I use is reclaimed from factory windows. This piece is titled Collateral Cathedral, and it was made for the second Imagine Peace Now exhibition that was held up at Rhode Island College's school. And here's a sequence of how this is made. So step 1, receive a bunch of handguns from Boris Bally. Step 2, cut them apart, organize them, smash them, stick them together. And then I made this V-dies in the hydraulic press so that I can squish this blob into something that would stick together and then go to the power hammer and forge it out. So here you see it before forge welding, and there it is during forge welding. And then here it is finished. I wanted to keep it loose so you can kind of see gun barrels in there. And here again is the finished piece. And the rose window is the ejector mechanism for a revolver. That forms the rose window, and there's a little rose gold rivet in there as well. So in 2021, Steve Manka and I were contracted by the Cleveland Metro Parks and the Wendy Park Foundation to design and build the entryway sculptures for the new 500-foot-long bridge, which was the final link connecting the towpath trail, which is roughly connecting Lake Erie to the towpath trail, and that's roughly 340-mile bike path from Cleveland to Cincinnati, and it's a great ride if you get a chance to do it. So we were inspired by the guardians of transportation on the Lorraine Carnegie Bridge in Cleveland. And this is our version. So they're 13.5 feet tall, stainless steel, and they're lit internally. So we wanted to have these little sculptural moments that you can see on the right side pylon there, and this is what's inside of it. So poppy pods are used often for remembrance, and I could make a very realistic poppy pod, but I wanted to forge gears and angle iron, and that's what this is made out of. And then here's a shot of it at night. There are color kinetic lights in there, so we can program it to change the light colors. This is the other side of the bridge. Wendy Park is a great bird migration stopover, and there's also, with the mouth of the river there, there's gulls all over the place. A lot of raptors go there as well, hawks and owls and eagles and falcons. And so I wanted to kind of pay homage to that with this by cutting out the murmuration of birds on this side of the bridge. There it is in the daylight. And then what's causing that murmuration is this peregrine falcon that I forged that's inside the box. I've never forged a bird before, and it was really fun to make that. So I'm also interested in photographing non-forged steel birds, especially birds of prey. This is a northern harrier I photographed at Mentor Marsh 2 winters ago. This is a Cooper's hawk lifting off. And I love digging into the details, just how we approach our work. This is a merlin. And as opposed to spending a month or longer working on a sculpture, one of my favorite things about photography is the immediacy of the medium, like capturing this unbelievable precision of the Thunderbirds at the air show in Cleveland. And then this is from this year's air show. And then capturing that decisive moment when an F-35 nears the speed of sound and starts to develop the vapor cone. This happens at around 770 miles per hour if the atmospheric conditions are just right, and I love that so much. And that inspired this series of candle holders. So in the fall of 2017, I had a month-long residency at San Diego State University, and I took 8 days driving there and 8 days driving back. And for me, the drive was just as much part of the residency as being at San Diego State. Again, it was kind of a furniture residency, so I spent a bunch of time up in the wood studio with steam bending wood, and I like that, that the steam bent wood for me became a metaphor for the landscape and how we interact with it. There's a detail shot of it. This piece is called Rift. In 2021, in the fall, October, I had a solo exhibition at the Sculpture Center in Cleveland, Ohio, and this piece was in that show. This is a detail of it. Don't know, this is a video, but anyway, this piece wobbles and sways if you just touch it. It's called Drift. The exhibition was titled The Way Things Go, and the works in here were a response to the precarious nature of our relationships with the environment, with the political landscape, and with each other. Oh, there it goes. This is a detail of that. So it's a 1.5-inch square house that traces a wide and wobbling arc 7 feet in the air, and it becomes a metaphor for our collective instability. And then this is the base of it, which is 15 pounds of relative stability. This is the last of the gun pieces that I've made so far. It's called Collateral Cathedral, Your Huddled Masses. The squares and rectangles punched along the deck there spell Your Huddled Masses in Morse code as a reference to Emma Lazarus's poem at the Statue of Liberty. So again, the cathedral is made out of forge welded handguns and then deeply etched to reveal all the different metals that are in the guns. And you can see the wheel at the bottom is the cylinders from a revolver. So I've been documenting Lake Erie for years in all different seasons. I love this Freighters on the Ice. And this is the crib, which is the Cleveland water supply source about 5 miles out into Lake Erie with a jet ski in front of it, the jet ski wake. So I've always wanted to make a sculpture based on the crib, but I didn't want to make the crib. And so this is a piece that was inspired by the crib. It's called Tilt, and it's also inspired by the tilt mechanism of a pinball machine. And just like a pinball machine, if the machine tilts too far, it's game over. And I thought that was a good metaphor for where we are politically. So this is a detail. So yeah, the sculpture based on a pinball machine's tilt mechanism tells the story of a society on the edge, but these pieces also look playful and toy-like, and again, that's a world I like living in. This piece is called Elevate, and it references the Marcel Breuer edition of the Cleveland Museum of Art, so don't we all want to elevate our work to be in that collection? So the summer of 2022 issue of Metalsmith magazine had a 13-page feature about my studio and my work, written by a local Cleveland writer, my favorite writer, Aaron O'Brien. I was so honored to be in this issue in particular because the preceding article to mine was written by Glenn Adamson, one of the foremost writers of craft in America, and he wrote about the history of contemporary blacksmithing and ironwork, and so some of my blacksmithing heroes were mentioned in that article. So last year, after nearly 15 years in the same studio in Cleveland, I had to move, and I was offered this space. So how could you pass that up? 19,000 square foot building, and this was my section of it. So we got to work. So I don't own the building. I'm just renting space in it, but it was important to me that the space didn't look like that. So we put in windows and a new door, and after a few months, this is what it looked like. And you can see the ceiling on the right side, or the left side is clean, and the rest of it is dirty. And the whole space was so gross. That space was the old boiler room, and there were 75 years worth of boiler room crud on the walls and ceiling. and I didn't want to work in that. I'd prefer to work in my own mess. So this was it after a few months of hard labor, painted, sealed, walls going up. So on the left is how I left the studio in March. I went to teach the 2-month-long concentration at Penland School of Crafts. I came home for a day and then went to teach a week at Center for Metal Arts in Pennsylvania, which is an amazing place. And then the shot on the right, Boris took on Monday. So there's part of the studio with stuff in it. There's an aerial view of the studio from a month or two ago. It looks different again now. So this is one of the first things I made in the new studio. This piece is 20 inches tall and made of steel and turned wood. And it was made for the exhibition called Turning It All Around at the Center for Furniture Craftsmanship up in Maine. There was a collaboration between a wood turner and a non-wood turner, and they asked me in reverse. I get this email that says, hey, it's one of the finest wood turners in the country. I'm like, wait a minute, I've never turned wood in my life. So the curators asked me to be in the show and to find a woodworker. And so I chose my dad, who's been making wood-turned vessels for the last couple of years now. So he said no at first, of course, and then I talked him into it, and he made this beautiful vase. And we were asked in the show to comment on how we've responded to the uneasiness of the last few years with COVID and whatnot. And since my work has dealt with that over the last few years, I decided that sometimes the best way to turn things around is to have a conversation with your dad, turn a wooden vase, and forge some flowers. And this is a detail of the flowers. I can make very realistic flowers, but I think it's more fun to forge gears and other things, angle iron. So this is a brooch, forged steel and gold, and a couple weeks ago I was invited by a collector friend to attend the Cleveland Orchestra Gala, which is a black tie event. So I bought a tuxedo, and I thought, you know, if you make wearable things, you might as well wear them. So that's me trying to be entrepreneurial. So why do we make things? Because sometimes it's fun to get dirty. Thank you.
Thank you. We've got about 5 minutes if there's a question. Yes.
So this is always the awkward pause. Oh, we have one. Yay. Hi.
Oh, let me come over there with the microphone for you.
This is a big question, but I wondered if you could talk a little bit more about that gap between being inspired and doing the work and then finding those people or galleries that are interested in it.
Yeah, well, I haven't quite figured that out yet. Has anybody? I don't know, some people might have. Like I said at the beginning, I always just try to do the best work I can, and hopefully people will find it. I feel really odd standing up here talking to you about being an entrepreneur, as I have a website that I haven't touched in 6 years. So that's doing me no favors. But if you have an updated website, I do keep social media updated, Instagram, which you can see the address up there for Instagram and Facebook. So that is current, so people can find work there. Sometimes I think with all the connections I've made throughout the field, I should be in a lot more places with the work. But I don't really know how you put them in places. I mean, you just, it's all about connections, honestly. So I think if I were really trying to get work out, I would just reach out to some of the connections that I have and say, hey, I've made this body of work. But I've been really fortunate to be able to move the work that I've made, at least enough of it to keep me doing this for 30 years. So yeah, I mean, I'm going to talk to the metals group at noon, I think, and if there's more questions, about specifics like that, I'd be happy to answer them, or just catch me outside of here, because it's a long answer, and I don't have like, yeah, do this. If it were only that easy. Anybody else? Yes. How did I get the guns? Is that what you're asking? Yeah. Boris Bally had a relationship with the Pittsburgh Police Department through the gun buyback program. And so he would get the guns from them and then he would weld them shut or cut them apart so they were no longer classified as a weapon. And he had a ton of them and he needed to get rid of them. So he sent them to different artists. And then for that second project, I wanted to have more than one gun. So I just asked him if he'd send me a couple more. Actually, my initial idea was to take whatever anybody who had the guns didn't use, just send them to me, and I'd forge weld them all together. But logistically, that was going to be a nightmare. So he just said, listen, I got a pile of these things. I'll just send them to you. So that's how I ended up with all these guns. And I'm hoping to work with the Cleveland Police Department. I want to do more of these projects, and hopefully something with a local restaurant is also doing things with guns, Edwin's, and so I'm hoping to be able to work with Brandon and get some guns that way and make some things. So yeah, there's a lot of people in the US making gun things now, which is, you know, it's pretty cool, raising the awareness. Anybody else? Yes.
All right, well, this is our last, I'm just gonna say this is the last question we can take because we're running out of time. So really quick.
Like 2 minutes.
2 minutes.
No, not really, because I mean, like the show at the Sculpture Center, the piece that was called Collateral Cathedral, Your Huddled Masses, I had it on basically on a 5 foot, I don't know, 8 foot long wedge, and I had photos of the process. I had a squashed handgun that was just, I took a gun, heated up, and smashed it under the forge, under the power hammer. So there was all the didactics laid out, and then the final piece. And so, no, I mean, I've only had people being very supportive of that. I mean, I'm not making an anti-gun statement necessarily. It's just drawing awareness that, you know, here's something else you can do with a gun.